At freshman orientation, I called to tell my son I'd arrived with the last of his supplies. He answered on speaker, surrounded by new friends and a girl hanging on his arm. "Wrong number," he said with a laugh, before hitting block. Just like that, I disappeared from his life, in public, like I was someone shameful. What he didn't know? His tuition payment was due in 24 hours. He blocked my number, so I blocked his future. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the kind of mother who could hit cancel payment without a second thought. In fact, I used to be the woman who would stand in the freezing rain for 2 hours just to see Julian walk across the stage at his middle school choir recital, smiling like it was Carnegie Hall. Before everything changed, I was the yes mom. Yes to last-minute field trips. Yes to overpriced art supplies. Yes to the 8th pair of sketch pens that looked identical to the last 7. I didn't spoil him with money, we never had much, but I spoiled him with presence, with effort, with sacrifice. I was 52, newly divorced, and rebuilding. Not just financially, but spiritually. After 20 years of marriage to a man who treated fatherhood like an optional job, I walked away with less than I deserved, but more than I'd had in years. My freedom. Julian was the one good thing that came out of that marriage. When his father left, after years of excuses, affairs, and business trips that ended at his secretary's condo, I held our son's tiny hand and said, "I'm still here. I'm always here." For the next decade, that was my role. Constant. Steady provider of packed lunches, permission slips, and pep talks before college entrance exams. When Julian said he wanted to be an artist, I said, "Then we'll find a way to make that dream happen." I ignored the whispers from family. "He needs something realistic." "You're enabling him." No, I was believing in him. I worked. Late nights as a receptionist at a 24-hour dental clinic. During the day, I stitched throw pillows for Etsy to scrape together side income. I skipped things, like dental work of my own or new clothes, so Julian could walk into his first day of college with a brand new laptop and enough art supplies to last the semester. He'd been accepted to one of the best visual arts programs in the state. I cried when we got the acceptance letter. I cried again when I saw the tuition amount, but I said yes, again. Because I believed in him. Julian wasn't a brat growing up. He was gentle, kind. He used to draw little comic books where he was the superhero, and I was always the wise queen who gave him his quest. He made me Mother's Day cards that said things like, "You're the reason I believe in myself." So when he started pulling away in his senior year, I told myself it was normal. Teenagers become independent. He was busy, stressed. I didn't panic when the phone calls got shorter or the hugs less frequent. But then came orientation day. I had packed up my old Honda with bins of neatly labeled supplies, laundry detergent, granola bars, extra hangers, and driven 6 hours to help him settle in. He hadn't asked me to, but I thought it would be a nice surprise. I called him as I parked by the dorm. I expected excitement, maybe a laugh. What I got was public erasure. "Wrong number," he said with a chuckle. "I don't know who that is." Then the call dropped. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A joke. I sat there blinking at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. I called again, straight to voicemail. I stared out the window of my car at the rows of bright-eyed students hugging their parents, taking selfies, hauling boxes. I looked down at the bins in my trunk, at the sticky notes labeled Julian's shower stuff, and desk organizers. That was the moment something began to shift inside me. A crack in the surface of a woman who had built her entire identity around being needed. Still, I wasn't ready to believe what it meant. I left the bins with the dorm RA. I texted Julian, simply, "I dropped everything off for you. Be well." It showed as delivered, but never read. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe he was just trying to impress his new friends. Maybe he was overwhelmed. I drove home in silence, chewing on guilt, confusion, and something bitter I couldn't Yet name, betrayal, days passed. Then, weeks. The pattern grew clearer. My messages went from daily check-ins to weekly lifelines. The last message I sent before he blocked me was, "I love you. I hope you're okay." That message is still unread. I used to be the kind of woman who would walk through fire for her child. Now I was starting to understand something even harder. Sometimes you have to walk away from the flames before they burn you down. A mother's love built his dreams, but when he locked the door on me, I realized it was time to find my own key. The silence wasn't just a phase, it calcified. It became routine. The boy who once couldn't sleep without hearing my voice now left my texts on read when he didn't block me outright. It started small, fewer responses, delayed replies. Then, instead of "love you, Mom," it was just K. Eventually, even those stopped. At first I told myself he was just adjusting. First year of college, new people, new schedule. He was overwhelmed. But deep down, a mother knows when absence isn't accidental, it's intentional. I heard from his cousin, Maya, who went to a nearby school. She'd seen Julian at a party. "He seemed different," she said carefully. "He was talking about how he comes from a distant background, like his parents weren't really part of his life." I blinked. "He said that?" She hesitated. "He didn't mention you at all." That night, I poured myself a glass of the cheap wine I usually saved for Christmas and opened up his social media. I hadn't looked in a while. He'd changed his profile. No mention of family. New bio, visual arts major, dream chaser, rebuilding my story. Scrolling through, my heart broke in 1,000 quiet ways. Photos of him at gallery openings, laughing with classmates, arm around a girl who looked like she walked out of a fashion ad. Captions like, "Some of us had to raise ourselves." One of them tagged a drawing he'd done, a portrait of a man in a business suit, his father. That was the punch that took the breath out of me. His father, who hadn't paid a cent of child support in over a decade, who missed birthdays and court hearings. That man was getting painted into Julian's future, and I had been erased. It wasn't just omission. It was reinvention. He was curating his image, constructing a version of himself that didn't include the woman who skipped meals to buy him canvases, who hand-washed his uniforms when the dryer broke, who sat in courtrooms while his father blamed work stress for cheating. And now here he was, rebuilding his story. And I wasn't even a footnote. The next few days, I tried to be rational. I called once. No answer. I left one message. No reply. I sent a care package with snacks and socks, thinking maybe something tactile would remind him. No thank you. Not even a confirmation it arrived. Still, I told myself not to overreact. I believed in giving him space. He was figuring himself out, right? That's what college is for. But then came the email from the university's finance office. Subject: Final tuition reminder. Action required. Dear parent or guardian, as of October 14th, the balance for the fall semester has not been paid. Without receipt of full payment by October 17th, your student may be dropped from all enrolled courses. I froze. I thought I'd set it up for auto payment. But no. Julian had insisted on switching to the new student portal where they let him manage the account. "I got it, Mom," he'd said over the summer, annoyed. "You don't need to baby me." Apparently, he hadn't got it. I called him, straight to voicemail. I called again from my landline. Still nothing. I sent a text. "Julian, I just got a notice from your school. The payment didn't go through. Call me." No reply. A few hours later, I tried from my work phone. This time, he picked up. But as soon as he heard my voice, there was a click. Hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief, not just ignored, not just forgotten. I was dismissed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the tuition portal open on one tab and his Instagram page on another. One showed a balance of $7,140 due. The other showed my son at a rooftop party, drink in hand, captioned, "Only way out is up." I had the power to keep that up going, to pay it, to make this problem disappear like I always had, and I almost did. My finger hovered over the Pay Now button, because that's what I'd always done. Clean up the mess, carry the weight, ask for nothing. But something stopped me. I opened another browser tab, bookmarked it. Community College Nursing Certificate Program, Spring Enrollment Open. Then I looked back at the tuition tab, $7,000. That was how much my self-worth cost, apparently. $7,000 for him to keep pretending I didn't exist. In the silence of my small kitchen, with a fridge that hummed louder than the voices in my head, I closed the laptop. For once, I didn't say yes. He thought he could lock me out and still cash the check, but I was done financing my own erasure. 3 days. That's how long I had to decide whether I was going to pay the bill or let it lapse. The university made it painfully clear in their follow-up email. If the tuition wasn't paid in full by Friday at 5 p.m., Julian would be automatically disenrolled. From all his classes, he didn't know I'd seen it. I was sure of that, because if he did, he would have called, pleaded, manipulated maybe. But there was nothing. No call, no text, no smoke signal. He really had shut the door that tightly, and the worst part? I still wanted to save him. That instinct to protect him was so deeply stitched into my being. I felt like a monster just for hesitating. Wasn't that what a good mother does? Pays the bill, keeps the dream alive, swallows her pride for the child she raised. But then I looked around. The dining table was still scratched from years of homework battles and late-night ramen bowls. The sofa sagged on one side where I used to sleep after long shifts. My fridge hummed beside an envelope from the power company warning of a possible shutoff if I didn't make a payment plan. My checking account had just enough to cover Julian's tuition, or my rent. I ran the math over and over in my head. If I paid, I'd be behind on everything else. I might not recover until next semester. But wasn't that what parents were supposed to do? Go broke for their kids? I called my sister Carla. "You've done more than enough," she said. "Don't you see what he's doing? He's not just pulling away. He's cutting you out, while still expecting the benefits." I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling. She continued gently. "He blocked your number, honey. People don't block the ones they love. Not unless something is very, very broken." "He's still my son," I whispered. "I'm all he has." Then maybe it's time he learns what that really means. The next morning, I went to work at the clinic. I was shaky, distracted. I made errors on forms. The dentist snapped at me for mixing up appointments. During my lunch break, I sat in my car, staring at the phone. I typed out a long message. "Julian, I'm not mad. I just need to talk to you. Please, I need to know what you want me to do." The school called again. "The payment is due Friday. I want to help, but I also want to understand why you're pushing me away." I stared at it, then hit send and watched. It turned into nothing. No read, no reply, just emptiness. That was the moment I felt it, the shift. The kind that starts in your stomach and rises through your chest like heat after a long cry. That feeling when you finally realize you've been waiting for something that's never coming. Love without acknowledgement. Giving without thanks. Presence without respect. I drove straight to my therapist's office. I didn't have an appointment. I sat in the waiting room like someone hoping for a miracle walk-in haircut. When she saw me, eyes red and hands clenched, she motioned me in. "He blocked me," I said. I think I'm finally done begging." She nodded softly. "You're allowed to have boundaries." "It doesn't feel like a boundary. It feels like abandonment." She held my gaze. "Love without boundaries isn't love. It's servitude." That night, I didn't open the tuition portal. I opened the nursing certificate site again. I filled out half the application before stopping. I wasn't ready to hit submit yet, but it felt like oxygen just knowing I could. Friday came. PM sharp. I sat at my laptop, heart thudding. The payment reminder sat in my inbox, blinking like a dare. I opened it, scrolled to the bottom, saw the big blue Pay Now button, and then I did something else. I clicked the tiny link below it. Cancel. Future autopay authorizations. 1 click. Password re-entry. Done. The site logged me out, and for the first time in 19 years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt released. No calls came that night, no texts the next day. Maybe he thought I'd done it. Maybe he hadn't checked yet, or maybe he was still expecting me to fix it at the last second like I always did. But I didn't, because I couldn't be invisible and indispensable at the same time. Letting go wasn't spiteful. It was survival. I didn't pull the rug out from under him. I just stopped holding it up while he danced on it. The house was quiet that weekend. Too quiet. I used to complain about the noise, Julian's music rattling the walls, the clink of his paint jars, the constant pings of text messages when he had friends over. Now all I had was the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own thoughts, heavy and relentless. Saturday night, I sat alone in the living room, the tuition deadline now behind me. I hadn't paid it. I hadn't heard from Julian either, but the memories? They came rushing in. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in our old apartment, the one-bedroom shoebox where we lived after his father left. Julian was 8, skinny as a broomstick, sitting cross-legged on the carpet drawing cartoons of superheroes. "Look, Mommy," he beamed, holding up a sketch of a caped crusader. "I made him based on you. He saves people, but also makes pancakes." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. That little boy. He used to look at me like I was made of light, like there was nothing I couldn't fix. Then another flash. Julian in high school, freshman year. It was raining so hard the streets flooded, and I had one working windshield wiper and bald tires. But he forgot his model sculpture at home, something he'd stayed up 3 nights building, and he'd called me, panicked. "Mom, I'll fail if I don't turn it in. Please." So I drove across town in a storm, holding the fragile clay and wire thing on the passenger seat like it was a newborn. I walked into the school soaked to my skin, handed it to him with a smile. He didn't even say thank you, just nodded and ran off. That's when the pattern started. Give again. Don't expect anything back. Don't even think about asking, because you're the mother, and mothers are supposed to give until they're empty. And then came the hardest. Flashback of all. The night his father didn't show up, Julian was 10, wearing his best button-down, waiting by the window. His dad had promised to take him to the baseball game, just the 2 of them. And Julian was so excited he'd packed a bag with snacks and even drawn a ticket for his dad to wear like a VIP badge. We waited 2 hours when the car never came. He looked up at me with eyes I'll never forget and said, "Did he forget me?" I held him on the couch as he cried into my chest. I remember stroking his hair and whispering, "He may forget, but I never will. I'll always show up for you. Always." That night was burned into my heart, and maybe that was the problem. I showed up so often, so fully, that I forgot to show up for myself. Now, here I was, alone, older, tired, sitting with the ache of being unwanted by the very person I'd once rearranged my entire life for. At around midnight, I opened my phone one last time. His number was still blocked on his end. I couldn't reach him, not directly, but I could speak anyway. I opened my notes app and wrote something I knew I'd never send. A letter. For me. "Julian, I don't know who you are right now, but I remember who you were. I remember every night I rocked you to sleep, every fever I sat through, every art show where you scanned the crowd until you saw me and smiled. I know I made mistakes. Maybe I was too involved. Maybe I didn't let you fall enough. But I loved you more than anything I've ever loved, and I let you go today. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I started loving myself. You taught me what it means to give, and now you've taught me what it means to stop. I saved the note. Then I closed the phone and placed it face down on the table, and in that stillness, I broke. No angry scream. No thrown glass. Just a wave of silent sobs, the kind that leave you breathless. Grief, not just for my son, but for the woman I'd been, the one who tied her identity so tightly to being someone's everything. I cried for her. And then I let her go too. Have you ever had to choose tough love over giving in? What happened? I'd love to hear your story below. The payment bounced, and so did his arrogance. But the lesson was about to land harder than either of us expected. The morning after I let the tuition payment lapse, I expected regret to slam into me like a freight train. Instead, there was only a strange calm, like a fog had lifted. I didn't check my email first thing. I didn't open the portal. I made coffee, strong, dark, the way I like it, and sat on the porch as the sun rose, wrapped in my old cardigan and a peace I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was a pause, a breath, a sliver of quiet power. By noon, the email came. Subject: action required, enrollment canceled due to non-payment. We regret to inform you that your student, Julian T. Samas, has been disenrolled from all fall semester classes due to non-receipt of full tuition payment by the deadline. Please contact the registrar for reinstatement procedures. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just sat with it. Then I closed the laptop and stood up. Something inside me had shifted. I'd always believed being a good mother meant fixing every broken piece. But maybe sometimes being a great mother meant letting someone else learn to fix their own. Later that day, Carla came by. I told her what I'd done. She blinked, then slowly smiled. "You actually didn't pay it?" I nodded. "Good for you," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "Seriously, that took guts." I don't feel proud. I feel empty, but in a clean way. "You set a boundary," she said. "And boundaries don't always feel good at first. They feel like grief. But that doesn't make them wrong." We sat in silence for a bit, drinking tea. She asked what I would do now. I surprised myself with the answer. "I think I'm going to apply to that nursing program." She raised her eyebrows. "Really?" I nodded. "I've spent the last 2 decades building someone else's life. Maybe it's time to build mine." The next day, I sat at the computer again, but this time, not to worry about Julian. I reopened the nursing certificate site, filled in the remaining fields, and hit submit. A few minutes later, I got the confirmation email. "Your application has been received. Spring cohort decisions will be sent by November." I smiled. It felt like planting a seed after a long, hard winter. The next few weeks passed without a word from Julian. I didn't reach out. I didn't check his social media. I didn't ask Maya for updates. Instead, I did something radical. I started living. I signed up for a community fitness class. Nothing intense, just a Tuesday morning yoga group at the rec center. I started meal prepping again, not because anyone needed me to, but because I wanted to nourish myself. I read novels, not parenting books or financial advice, fiction, stories that had nothing to do with survival. One afternoon, I stood in line at the grocery store and saw a young boy helping his mother load apples into their cart. He looked up at her and said, "We got the red ones like you like, Mom." She smiled at him like he'd just given her a diamond. That's when the tears came. Not of sadness, but of release. Because I had that once, and I lived it fully. And now I was living something else. Few days later, I got a letter in the mail, not from Julian, from the community college. "Dear applicant, Congratulations. You have been accepted into the Spring 2026 Nursing Certificate Program. I held the letter like a fragile treasure. For the first time in years, the next chapter was about me. It wasn't a complete healing. It wasn't closure wrapped in a bow. But it was something real. A moment of light after months of darkness. A step forward, and then, as if on cue, the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A pause, then a familiar voice, unsure and soft. Mom? I said nothing at first, just listened to the sound of his breath, the static of hesitation. I just found out I was dropped from school, he said. They said it was because of non-payment. Did something happen? My throat tightened. Nothing happened, I said. I just didn't pay it. Another pause. Why? I think you know why. He didn't respond. But the silence was different now. It wasn't full of arrogance. It was full of something heavier. Consequence. You said you'd always support me, he said finally, his voice cracking. I did. For 19 years. But you blocked me, Julian. Not just on your phone, in your life. I had to choose between being respected or being used. I could almost hear him swallow his pride. And then came the words I didn't expect. I'm sorry. He finally called me, but I wasn't the same woman who used to wait by the phone. It wasn't a warm reunion. It wasn't even a real apology, but it cracked open something. The day after that brief phone call, Julian showed up on my doorstep. Unexpected, unannounced. I was folding laundry when I saw a figure through the window. He looked different. Not the confident young man from his Instagram photos. This version of Julian had a sunken look in his eyes. His hair was overgrown, and his hoodie hung off him, like a weight. I opened the door but didn't step aside. He stood there, shoulders hunched like a boy caught in the act. Can I come in? He asked. I looked at him, really looked. He hadn't even tried to dress up or hide the struggle. His pride was cracking, and I could feel it. I nodded once, stepped aside. He walked into the living room and looked around like a guest, like someone trying to remember how the room used to smell when dinner was in the oven, or where he used to dump his backpack. I said nothing. I sat down and waited. He sank into the chair across from me, silent for a long moment. Then finally, I didn't think you'd actually do it. I didn't flinch. And I didn't think you'd ever block my number. He looked away, ashamed. I was stupid, he said. I was trying to impress people. Everyone at school had these perfect lives, and I didn't want to be the kid whose mom worked at a dental clinic. I was embarrassed. I stayed quiet. I wasn't going to rush in and comfort him. That part of me was still healing. I thought if I could just fit in, just make it work that first year, I'd make you proud. But I ended up losing everything. He ran a hand through his hair. They dropped me. I can't re-enroll until next semester, and now Dad's not answering either. I thought he'd help. He always said he would, but I raised an eyebrow. Julian looked up at me and froze. You were right about him, he muttered. He bailed. Of course he did. Julian's father had always been good at making promises when they were easy to keep, and even better at disappearing when they weren't. Now, with no school, no money, and no parental lifeline to cling to, Julian had finally landed where he never expected to be. On my couch, eye to eye with the woman he'd tried to forget. I need your help, he said. I'll do whatever it takes. Just help me fix this. I looked at him for a long time, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with the kind of clarity that comes when the fog of motherly obligation finally lifts. You don't need help fixing your tuition, I said quietly. You need help fixing you. He blinked, stunned. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not your rescue plan. I'm not here to mop up your messes or write checks in exchange for your silence. You want help? Then show me you're willing to do the work, not just ask for it. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "But I'm your son," he said, almost like a question. "And I've been your mother every single day of your life," I replied. "Even the ones you pretended I didn't exist." A thick silence settled between us. I could see it in his eyes, the fear of losing my support, yes, but something deeper too. The realization that his old way of operating, taking without giving, was no longer going to work. "I'm not saying I don't love you," I said. "I do. Fiercely. But love without accountability is poison. It ruins both people." He leaned, back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. "So what do I do now?" "You get a job. You pay off one class at a time if you have to. You take responsibility for the life you want to build. And if you want me in that life, you show up, with respect." He looked down at his hands. "I guess I thought you'd always just catch me." "I did," I said. "Too many times. And I hurt myself doing it. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. But it cut deeper than anything we'd said in years." Julian stood slowly, nodding. "Okay," he said. "I'll figure it out." I walked him to the door. He turned as he stepped outside. "I really am sorry, Mom." This time, I believed him. But I didn't let him off the hook. "I know," I said. "Just don't make me regret believing it." He walked down the steps, slower than he'd arrived. He wasn't fixed. But he was starting to feel the weight of the world he'd taken for granted, and I was finally free of carrying it for him. The boy who once clung to my leg now walked away like a stranger, and for the first time, I didn't follow. The days that followed Julian's visit felt quieter, but not empty. There was a different kind of silence now, not the aching void of being ignored. This was a silence I chose, a silence I owned. Julian didn't call. I didn't chase. Instead, I moved forward. I started my nursing prep classes at the community center, just the basics: anatomy flashcards, CPR certification, intro lectures with too many acronyms. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. For the first time in decades, I was investing in my future, not as someone's mother, not as someone's helper, just as me. I made new friends in class, people half my age, some twice my age, all starting over in their own way. There was a woman named Denise who had 3 grandkids and still showed up in scrubs with her coffee at 7 a.m. There was a man who'd once worked on oil rigs, now learning to become a phlebotomist. We laughed over flashcards, shared study snacks, and commiserated about late-night cramming sessions. For the first time in a long time, I belonged to something that didn't require me to bleed just to be seen. And then, it happened. An email from Julian. Subject line: "Thank you for letting me fall." It was short, sincere. "Mom, I started a job at the student cafe on campus. I'm staying with a friend from class until I can afford a place. I'm enrolled in 2 community college art classes this semester, just enough to keep me moving forward. I used to think love meant protection, but now I know it also means letting someone feel the ground. You didn't abandon me. You showed me where I stood. Thank you, Jay." I read it twice, then a third time. There were no promises, no dramatics, just a quiet acknowledgement of growth. I smiled. I didn't reply. Not right away. He needed to live in that moment on his own, without expecting applause. 1 week later, I saw him in person again, not at my house, not unannounced. This time, it was planned. We met at the community center cafe, a neutral space. He walked in wearing a worn jacket and dark circles under his eyes, but his posture was straighter, his eyes clearer. Something in him had matured, not entirely, but meaningfully. He hugged me, not out of guilt, out of something more solid: recognition. "Got my first paycheck yesterday," he said with a small, sheepish smile. It's not much, but I put some of it toward my art materials. I'm budgeting now. Like, for real. I'm proud of you, I said simply. Not because you're working, but because you're owning it. He nodded. We sat down, sipping. Coffee like old friends trying to find their rhythm again. I used to think asking for help was weakness, he said. But I realized taking without gratitude, that's the real weakness. I didn't say, I told you so. I just listened. He told me he'd been reaching out to a counselor on campus, that he'd started sketching again, nothing flashy, just honest. Drawings of people in the cafe, old men waiting at the bus stop, a self-portrait he said still felt incomplete. I'm figuring out who I am without the mask, he said, and without the money I used to act like I didn't need. For the first time in a long time, I saw him again. Not the polished version he'd tried to sell to the world, but the boy with the comic books. The boy who made a superhero with a pancake cape. And I realized something. He had to break away, from me to become someone new, but I had to break free from him to become someone whole. As we said goodbye, he pulled something out of his backpack, a sketch. Me, sitting at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, window behind me streaming light. Across my shoulders. I drew this from memory, he said. I remembered how you looked the morning after you told me no. I looked down at the drawing. My face in it wasn't soft. It was tired, but strong, real. I hope you keep this, he said, because I want you to remember that day the way I finally do, not as the moment you let me fall, but the moment you taught me to stand. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't cry. I just nodded, because for the first time, he understood. He walked out of that cafe lighter, and I walked away knowing I'd raised a man, not just a son. Julian didn't magically become perfect after that cafe meeting. There were still awkward pauses on the phone, long gaps between texts, and moments where old patterns peeked through like cracks in plaster. But there was effort now, humility, where there used to be pride. That mattered more than any apology ever could. About 2 months after our conversation, he sent me a letter. Not an email, a handwritten letter, folded neatly into a blue envelope with my name in tight block letters across the front. I read it 3 times that night. Mom, I never understood what it took for you to raise me. I used to think love meant always saying yes, always showing up with the answer. But now I know. Love is also knowing when not to show up, when to let someone fall, when to walk away so they can walk forward. You didn't fail me. I failed to see you. I see you now. Love, Julian. I sat on the edge of my bed holding that letter, feeling something uncoil in me. A knot that had been tangled for years. I wasn't just seen, I was finally recognized. Not as a bank account, not as a backup plan, but as a woman who gave everything and then chose herself. I didn't cry. I smiled. Julian came over for dinner the following week. He brought flowers, daisies, my favorite, said he remembered I liked them because they look like they're always trying to smile. He helped me set the table. No phone in hand, no rushed attitude, just presence. Over spaghetti and garlic bread, he told me about his part-time job, how he'd learned to budget down to the dollar, how humbling it was to choose between textbooks and a night out. He said he was back in school, taking 2 community college classes, paying for them in monthly installments. I still want to get my degree, he said, but I'm not rushing anymore. I want to earn it this time. I told him I'd started my nursing classes. His eyes lit up. Seriously? He asked. Mom, that's amazing. It felt good. Not just the pride in his voice, but the fact that he saw me doing something for me. We were finally speaking to each other as adults. 2 people rebuilding something not because it was easy, but because it was honest. Later that night, after the dishes were done, he lingered by the door. You know, he said, there were a few weeks there when I hated you. I nodded, slowly. I know, but now I'm grateful you didn't save me. I stepped forward and touched his arm. I never stopped loving you. But I needed you to love yourself enough to stand on your own. He looked down. I'm getting there. As he walked to his car, he turned back with a boyish grin. Hey, do you remember the superhero I used to draw? The one based on you? Pancake. Cape? I smiled. How could I forget? I found those old sketches in a box last week, he said. I think I'm going to redraw them. But this time, not as a kid's fantasy, as a tribute. I didn't say anything. I just watched him drive off, heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. 2 days later, I got another message from him. This time, a photo, a sketch pad, open on his desk, a pencil drawing of me, not flawless or glamorous, but strong, lined face, steady eyes, a cape made of folded laundry draped over my shoulders. Caption, still the hero. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Have you ever reconnected with someone after a painful break? What changed? Let's talk about it below. He found his footing, and I found my freedom. And somehow, in that distance, we discovered a bond deeper than obedience. Respect. I used to think the hardest part of parenting was the beginning, the sleepless nights, the tantrums in the cereal aisle, the scraped knees and broken hearts you couldn't always fix. But I was wrong. The hardest part was letting go of the version of motherhood where love was measured by how much pain you could carry without complaining. I spent nearly 2 decades showing up for my son, even when it meant disappearing in every other part of my life. I postponed dreams. I quieted needs. I said yes when I wanted to scream no. All because I believed that was what good mothers do. And maybe it was, until it wasn't. Because there comes a point when loving someone means stepping back, not stepping in. Letting Julian fall wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of faith. Faith that the boy I raised, the one who used to fall asleep beside me with marker on his hands and dreams in his head, would eventually remember who he was. And more importantly, who I was too. He didn't just need a tuition payment. He needed a mirror, and sometimes life is the clearest mirror we'll ever hold up. Since that final conversation, our relationship hasn't gone back to what it was, and that's a good thing. It's not codependent. It's not built on guilt or sacrifice. It's slower, more thoughtful, more real. We don't talk every day. We don't need to, but when we do, it's honest, balanced. Julian still struggles sometimes. So do I. That's life. But now when he asks for help, he does it with respect. And when I offer it, I do it with choice, not obligation. That's the difference. I still have the sketch he gave me at the kitchen table, drawn from memory, laundry cape and all. It's framed now, sitting on my desk beside a stack of anatomy textbooks and a chipped mug that says, "Trust your gut." I'm halfway through my nursing certificate program. I'm not the top of the class, but I'm showing up. For me. A few nights ago, Julian sent me a photo of a mural he's working on at a local community center. It's bold, textured, full of color. A silhouette of a woman holding up a bridge made of broken pencils and stitched fabric. Underneath, in small lettering, he painted, "Built from love, reinforced with boundaries." I stared at it for a long time, because that's what we are now. Not just mother and son, but 2 people learning how to love each other in a way that doesn't require losing ourselves. I won't pretend it's perfect. There are still moments where the old wounds tug at my heart, moments where I miss the little boy who used to believe I could fix everything with a hug and a bowl of cereal, but now I realize I did fix something, not by making the pain go away, but by letting it teach us both how to grow. So if you're a parent who's ever felt like love means giving until there's nothing left, I'm here to tell you, you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to say no, and saying no doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it means you finally started to heal, Because real love isn't about sacrifice without end. It's about teaching the people we love how to stand without leaning so hard they never learn to walk. I used to think I'd lost my son when I didn't pay that tuition, but now I see I didn't lose him. I helped him find himself, and somewhere in the wreckage, I found myself too. He learned resilience. I learned release. And in the space between, we discovered the kind of love that no payment could ever buy.